You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Hristodoulou, and today, as we do at the end of every NFL week, it's time for some power rankings and to recap this past weekend's doubleheader on Sunday. The two championship games, our Super Bowl for the season has been decided. There's a lot to talk about, some controversy in the second game, a lot to get into. So as we rank the final four teams right now, we will also recap the games a little bit, get into some of the nitty-gritty of what happened. But for those of you watching, I have a question for you all today. In the comment section down below, let me know, how are you feeling about the officiating so far through this season and the playoffs right now? There seems to be a lot of conversation going on surrounding the officiating of this past week's games, and something that seems to just come up a lot, honestly, week to week at this point, and not even just in the NFL, but in sports in general. How do you feel about this past weekend's games, especially the Bengals and Chiefs game? There's a lot of penalties being thrown around. There was some weird issues where downs were being nullified even though they were being played through because of clock management issues or whatever it may be. There was a lot going on in that Chiefs-Bengals game, and when I got up this morning, I believe when I went on Twitter, it said something like 38,000 tweets going hashtag NFL rigged in some capacity. So I would love to hear from you all how you're feeling about the officiating from this week's games and just overall from the NFL's officiating. Give me some of your opinions down below. But let's dive into these teams right now and start talking to them. We're only working through the top four teams right now, as every other team has been set in stone and firmly ranked for the year. For those of you that are just listening on a podcast platform, remember we are on YouTube and you're missing out on the visual side of things. So make sure you come check us out here on YouTube, the Greeks Gridiron. But if you're just listening, in this order, we are looking at the Bears at 32, Colts at 31, the Texans at 30, Cardinals at 29, Raiders at 28, Broncos at 27, Rams at 26, Jets at 25, the Titans at 24, Falcons 23, Saints are at number 22, Browns at 21, the Panthers at 20, Commanders at 19, Patriots at 18, Packers at 17, the Buccaneers are at 16, the Seahawks are at 15, the Steelers at 14, the Dolphins at 13, the Lions at 12, Ravens at 11, the Vikings at 10, the Giants at 9, the Chargers at 8, the Bills at 7, the Cowboys at 6, and the Jaguars settle out the group of already known teams at number 5. If you have not been following along with my power rankings as of late, I do these every single week, so if you're looking for explanations on these other 28 teams that are ranked here, feel free to go back and check out some of those other videos. I kind of go into more detail as to why I have those teams where they are as you go through the playoffs and going back towards the end of the season. Now, for numbers 4 and 3, I figured I'd group the remaining 4 teams into 2 groups of 2 here because we have 2 losers and we have 2 winners, and I'll rank them out kind of like so. So with that in mind, at number 4 and number 3, the San Francisco 49ers fit into that number 4 spot, and then the Bengals fall into that number 3 spot. I have got to say, the Eagles blowing out the 49ers in that game with everything that was going on with them, not really surprising, but I was having a conversation with somebody about this yesterday while the games were kind of playing out, and even with what happened to Brock Purdy injury-wise, I don't think that Eagles victory looks much different. Maybe it's a slight bit closer, like maybe we're looking at 31-14 or something like that, but it did not seem like the 49ers offense was really going even when Purdy was in there. And when you get to that fumble that ended up being the injury play for Brock Purdy, it just kind of seemed like the offense was already struggling, and that was kind of like, that was the tipping point. And obviously Purdy going down really hurt this team. You have Josh Johnson coming in, then he gets concussed, and then at that point you basically can't even throw the football because Purdy's playing with a bum arm, and it being his throwing arm, he wasn't able to do anything. It's a really tough loss for the 49ers, and you could clearly see the emotion on them at the end of the game. And while I do think that the 49ers are an excellent team, they do have a question mark at quarterback. This ended up being the game where I feel like Brock Purdy kind of was figured out, and not necessarily exposed, but we saw what Brock Purdy was, and that was a 7th-round pick. Now, you can say, oh, well, he only threw, 4 or 5 passes in the game. You could tell that this was a different team and a different defense. We kind of saw the cracks last week against Dallas, but then moving into this game where I would argue the 49ers defense is even better than what the Dallas Cowboys are fielding right now, this was a really tough defense, and I don't really know if Brock Purdy was up for that challenge. And that's no slight to San Francisco and to the 49ers and, Brock Purdy himself and the offensive line over there. It's just, that's how good this Eagles team really is. They have walked their way through the NFC playoffs, and you can say what you want about the teams that they played and the situations they were in. You don't win those games by those score margins by accident. At the end of the day, the Eagles didn't really have to throw the ball a ton. They were just killing you on the ground. There is something special about that Eagles team, and I do want to give credit where it's due for the 49ers. I think that they are one of the best teams in the NFL right now. They have one of the most talented rosters by all means. The secondary is probably their biggest weak point, and even that is a pretty solid group at that. But from the D line to the linebackers to the secondary on defense, and then the offensive line, the skill players that they have there, if they can figure out their quarterback situation, this should be a team that is going to contend and find themselves in these championship games for the next few years at the very least. As for the Bengals at number 3, talk about a really tough pill to swallow and a really tough ending for a game that you were in pretty much the entire way through. I was saying when it was 20-13 Chiefs that the Bengals really needed to come away with a big turnover, and ultimately Patrick Mahomes with the ball flying out of his hands and being recovered by Cincinnati. Massive, massive play. You put yourself in position to at least take the game into overtime, and a really tough penalty by Ozai at the end of the game. Really unfortunate, and you could see the emotion on his face. He knew he messed up, and I feel for the guy. And at the end of the day, you can't put all of the loss on him. You are in that position as a team, and you win and lose as a team. Sometimes somebody is a hero, but it's a team win. Sometimes somebody is the villain, quote unquote, but you lost as a team. It's unfortunate the way that went down. I'm not going to really dive into the officiating and everything because I could sit here and talk about that for a while because I have a lot of thoughts on it, but this is not the video for that, and this is not the conversation for that. We're ranking teams strictly here. Officiating aside, the Bengals, in my opinion, are the at least second best team in the AFC at this moment, and they have a strong case for being a team that is just as good as the Chiefs, if not better. They have all the talent and everything, but with the impending free agent list that they have coming up this offseason, it'll be really interesting to see how this team shakes out. So I'm fine with them being at number 3, but the Bengals, man, they are juiced up and ready to roll for the next few years. You still have a really good group of skill position players all across the board. Offensive line is a strength. It's just unfortunate they lost 3 of their linemen working their way into the playoffs here. If this is a healthier offensive line, I'm very curious to see how this game plays out. I think it ends up being a game where the Cincinnati Bengals maybe control a little bit better. They were lucky enough that they were able to just pound the rock and steamroll the Buffalo Bills defense, but clearly the Chiefs defense built a little bit differently. They have a few more studs up front. They were a little bit healthier on the defensive front side, so you weren't going to be able to just bulldoze over this Chiefs defense the way they did against Buffalo last week, and clearly KC has found some dudes in the secondary, and they have some studs on the D-line as well. There's a lot of really good young talent over there in KC, so they have seemed like they're kind of locked and reloaded right now, and this Chiefs kind of thing that they've been doing for the last 5 years, hosting AFC championships, it doesn't really seem like it's going to slow down. But the Bengals, I've got to say, and just hats off to them for the season that they had. They are one of the best teams in the NFL, and I would say at worst, they are the second best team in the AFC. Now, for the top 2 teams, a lot of consideration going between these two, but I think one roster is a little bit more complete than the other, and as I sat there trying to make my decision, I kept coming back to one team more than I did the other, and so I settled on, at number 2, the Kansas City Chiefs, and then at number 1, the Philadelphia Eagles. I feel like the Eagles have not gotten quite the love that they deserve from people throughout the entirety of this season. They took that one loss to the Commanders, and I feel like they got like this whole, frauds type thing going on for a while. And then they kind of wiped that slate clean because they were doing so well after that loss. Then you take a couple of losses when Jalen Hurts was injured, and then the conversation became, can this team go minus Jalen Hurts? Which is funny because at the beginning of the season, the question was, is Jalen Hurts even the franchise quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles, or do they want to try and move on from him? So funny how, 18, 19, 20 weeks can kind of change the narrative around a quarterback. Then you have the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that, again, very talented. They have a lot of really good young and up-and-coming talent on the defensive side of the ball especially. They don't necessarily have like that stud Tyreek Hill guy anymore, but they have a bunch of really good wide receivers that, Patrick Mahomes can just kind of dish the ball out to wherever he needs to, paired with a really good young running back in Isaiah Pacheco, an awesome offensive line, and then obviously who at this point is arguably the greatest tight end of all time, at least on the receiving end of things. You can say what you want about his blocking ability. That's, again, we're not going to dive into specific stuff, but I mean, Travis Kelce has a legitimate case for being the best tight end in NFL history at this point, because he is taking records very slowly but surely, and at this point, you give him another couple of seasons and he might hold them all for the tight end. And I mean, he's up there in receiving records, not even just tight ends, but the receiving records they were showing during the game. I really think that when I look at both of these two teams and kind of what led me to go into Philadelphia just a little bit more than the Kansas City Chiefs, it really just boils down to the consistency and ability for the Philadelphia Eagles to just beat teams no matter what the situation is, and they've been doing it so convincingly as well. Don't get me wrong, Kansas City has looked really good this back half of the... Honestly, they've looked good all season long. What am I even saying back half of the season? But I've really, really liked them this back half of the season. High ankle sprain aside from Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs didn't even really feel that different. I mean, yeah, we didn't really see Patrick Mahomes move around in the pocket, but he showed that he can kind of sit in the pocket and just work his magic. And when they needed him to play at his actual level the most, that final play of the game before the field goal, he was able to do it. You're going to get a couple of weeks off and you're going to get the time to heal. But I don't quite know if this Chiefs team is ready for just how good this Eagles defense is. While I like the Kansas City Chiefs defense, I don't fear them as much, and I don't think they're as imposing. And then L'Jarius Sneed gets hurt in that game against the Bengals as well. A little bit concerned about his availability going into that game. The Eagles are a multi-threat offense. They can beat you on the ground, through the air, or Jalen Hurts can do it with the ball in his hands. Whatever he has to do or whatever that offense needs to do, they have found ways to get it done. But that defense, the 70 sacks this year, just the rush 4, drop back the other 7 and do what you got to do, that is a really tough defense to beat, and is also kind of the way teams have to beat Patrick Mahomes. The rush 4, drop 7 type of teams are the ones that have found most success against this Kansas City unit. So I'm leaning a little more towards the Eagles right now. I just like their defense a little bit more than what Kansas City has. I know that, Kansas City was really good at putting pressure on the quarterback and hitting the quarterback at that, but the Eagles were arguably the best team in the league. And I don't even know if that's an argument. I'm just saying that for the sake of argument's sake, but when it comes to getting home and bringing down the quarterback, the Eagles are that team, and they know how to disrupt an offense. So I'm leaning a little bit more towards the Eagles right now. I'm not going to be making my Super Bowl pick right now or anything like that, but in my initial reaction to what I've just saw and kind of my feelings about these two teams at this point in the season, that's kind of where I stand right now. Do my power rankings necessarily reflect who I think is going to win the Super Bowl? Absolutely not. This is just my quick reaction from the next day. We'll get into the Super Bowl picks next week. We have the Pro Bowl coming up right now. So, I mean, we're kind of in a little bit of a lull week right now. I always like this week because it is a nice little break from like just the hectic world that is the NFL. But we're going to take a little bit of a slower week. I'm going to be doing more off-season previews for multiple teams. If you haven't checked those out, I've already done the first 4 teams picking in the draft. My order of the videos is going in the order of the draft. So essentially, we've done picks 1 through 4 right now. We'll continue on to 5, 6, 7, 8. We'll work our way through the week here. If you have not been around for my USFL content, that is starting up in a couple of months, and we'll get into what I'm doing with spring football fairly soon as well. You can expect an announcement on that. So if you found me because of the USFL, but you've been sticking through the NFL, that's coming up this week as well. So discussion there. There is a lot to get into during this week, but it is a slower week, so be prepared for that. However, I am looking forward to seeing how this Pro Bowl games thing kind of rolls out, because the Pro Bowl itself has been awful to watch the last few years. So it's nice to see that they're doing something, and hopefully it's entertaining, right? But those are my power rankings and just kind of what you can expect from this little bit of a slower week here in the NFL. I appreciate you all. And again, comment down below. Let me know, how are you feeling about officiating in the NFL? Very controversial weekend. Like I said, I went on Twitter this morning and I saw like 38,000 tweets or something like that trending within NFL Rigged. So I'm sure you guys have a lot to say and I'd love to hear it. But that's it for me. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.